our second panel discussion session for the day on the topic of exploring M&A amidst disruption and transformation, whereby we will be focusing on understanding the importance and insights of mergers and acquisitions in the professional domain. So let us welcome our panelists for this session. Our first panelist is Mr. Sanjit Kaur Batra, Group Vice President, Legal and Legal Head, India at Cummins, India. Please have a huge round of applause, everyone. The moderator of the session, Mr. Pathik Arora, General Counsel at Senvion, India. Please have a huge round of applause, everyone, for Mr. Pathik Arora. Our third panelist, Mr. Panduranga Acharya, General Counsel at Zepto. Can we have a huge round of applause, everyone? Our fourth panelist is Mr. Nikunj Savaliya, Head Corporate Legal at Bayer Corp Science Limited. Let's have a huge round of applause for all our panelists.
Hi, everyone. And thank you for being here. Today's topic, pretty relevant in the scenario, M&A, MS disruption and transformation. Unlike the topic that I was moderating yesterday on force majeure, where I had to try and put the fun element in it, I think M&A itself is fun, so I don't hopefully need to add any spice to it. I will just set the context before I move on to my fellow panelists. As you know, most of them, all of them actually work for large corporations or startups, and would have their own fill as far as M&As are concerned. But just to give a context on what is happening these days as far as M&As are concerned. Until 2021-22, there was a lot of traction that we saw. The market was pretty bullish on M&A scenario. However, 23 somehow saw a huge decline in the M&A space. Of course, there have been reasons around it, mainly about high cost of capital, high financing costs. High financing cost, high cost of capital, and therefore we really saw a huge decline as far as 23 was concerned. In fact, the value of M&As almost halved to $2.5 trillion in 23 compared to about $5 trillion in 21. Not just the value, the amount of deals also squeezed to almost 20. Squeezed by almost 20%. From 65,000, it came down to about 50,000 deals in 2021, and sorry, in 2023. And in addition, what we also saw is that the large deals squeezed significantly. Large deals, when I say, I'm talking about say more than $5 billion deal, they came down significantly, came down by almost 60%, which was a huge concern also, and a huge opportunity also. Opportunity from a perspective that, which actually meant that people were looking to distribute their risks. Distribute their risks among smaller deals, smaller acquisitions, smaller mergers. And that's what we saw in 2023. However, now, as we speak, the market is again bullish in 24. Don't ask me reasons, because I don't know if I'm completely convinced with the reasons, though the pundits say that we have reached the tipping point. There's no way we can go further. We can slide further. And maybe that's one of the reasons we'll just go up. I don't know what my fellow panelists think here, but I am not completely convinced. Especially it won't happen unless we see the cost of capital, the interest costs, financing costs stabilizing and maybe going down. Unless we see that, it is difficult for us to to really comprehend what's going to happen. Though, of course, 24 until now, the scenario has been quite the same. Of course, there's been traction. People are now talking about deals, talking about larger deals, but nothing really that has really, you know, hit from a positive perspective. The larger deals, or most of the traction that has happened in 23 deals has been, has been basically, say, energy space saw couple of, or the largest deals in terms of value globally. One was Exxon proposed acquisition of Pioneer. Second was Chevron acquiring Hess. However, you may say that was an aberration. Those were deals close to about, say, close to, or maybe $50+ billion, but those were only aberrations as far as last year was concerned. Now, let's see what happens. The other reason that we see that 24 maybe a excuse me. The other thing that we see is that there is a lot of room now for consolidation with the businesses. A lot of businesses under stress at the moment. And a lot of businesses that are trying to create value for their specific businesses, their specific segments. As you would have recently heard, very recent example being Tata Motors, which has segmented its businesses, EV on one side and the personal or private vehicles and commercial vehicles on the other side. So I think that's what you're going to see more and more as far as 24 is concerned. The segmenting of businesses, consolidation of businesses, and then putting some businesses to, or opening those businesses to M&A. This is, what normally is, I think, we're going to see. Now with this, maybe I will, go to my first panelist, Sanjit. So Sanjit, what, I would maybe, I'm sure you would have, in your life done a lot of M&As, cross-border, domestic. So what are the considerations or factors maybe you see or you strategize or advise when you advise in the management on how to approach an M&A? What are your considerations or what are your different considerations depending upon whether it's a cross-border M&A vis-a-vis a domestic M&A?
Thanks. And good morning, everyone. Pleasure to be here. And thank you all for sparing time and attending this event. So going back to the question, M&A is a reality, good, bad, ugly, it's here to stay. M&A is never easy, whether it's domestic or it's a cross-border one. But the complications of a cross-border M&A are much different than when you're dealing with a domestic one. Because in domestic, typically you would have one jurisdiction which is involved, whereas in a cross-border or a global M&A, there are multiple jurisdictions that are involved. So the broad considerations that form the basis of the advising is one, the cultural differences. Each country has its own cultural differences. And of course, each country has its own regulatory and legal structures that have to be factored in. And the methodology of valuation, for example, what are some of the approvals that are required, whether it is the merger control, how much foreign investment is allowed in different sectors, what are the taxation, as all of you know, tax drives the crux of how a M&A deal is structured. So what are the tax considerations in different jurisdictions? And on the basis of those tax considerations, what are the deal documents that have to be finalized, that have to be executed in each country? What are going to be some of the closing conditions? And small things like, your employment terms. Each country has very different employment laws. So what are going to be some of the employment terms, closing conditions? How are retirals going to be treated? These are added layers of complications that drive a cross-border transaction. Also, normally, you would have one closing date globally, but the closing cannot happen unless you have approvals across all jurisdictions, especially when we talk of merger control filings, etc. In practically every country, you need prior approvals in all the major jurisdictions before a deal can be closed globally. So that adds a very nuanced approach. You can have a closing, but you also need to be prepared that in case you don't get the regulatory approvals, what do you do? What are your various milestones, etc., that have to be factored in to make sure that it's a successful M&A closure? And due diligence. Again, each country, you have specific business that operates in a certain way in each country. So when it's a global M&A transaction, the due diligence in each country, what are the numbers that are factored for each business, it just is a separate ball game. And some of the things that help in these transactions is, of course, having a very strong collaboration in the internal teams. You have one central team, but you make sure that all the different countries are a part of that functional team to be able to provide inputs and drive the whole process.
Yep, sure. Thanks, Sanjit. No, I agree. A domestic transaction vis-a-vis a cross-border is completely different ballgame, and your approach has to be absolutely, is normally absolutely different, especially when cross-border is like spread across jurisdictions. It is no easy game to know or understand the regulations of each country. Then you have to, of course, liaise with or coordinate with various councils in each jurisdiction. You also have an objective in mind for an M&A and how it is really harnessing with the objectives that each one of the targets may have. It surely is a fun game, to be honest, at that point of time. But yeah. So with this, maybe I'll just go to Panduranga first and ask him what suggestions, Panduranga, would you actually generally give to your management or board for harnessing the real value of M&A, especially both from the operational strategy perspective and maybe key talent perspective.
Yeah, thank you, Pathik. See, in the strategy conversations, mostly general counsels are excluded, right? The point when it comes to what is the willingness of a general counsel to understand what was the strategy and what actually the objective of such merger or acquisition is concerned. Therefore, it is important for the general counsel to make sure as to align one's objective along with the organization objective. That's very important aspect. And insofar as once the objective is clear for the general counsel, the general counsels will have to assume the risk officer's role and then start looking at all the risk attached to the transaction or a probable risk attached to the transaction. Obviously, general counsels are in good positions and capable of understanding the risk. All right, mergers, you will have issues we'll have to deal with throughout the transaction, not only at the stage of strategy, but also at the time of closing. You might have to look at documentation closing, right? Implementation agreements and merger scheme documentations, etc. India is all right, but in case of a cross-border, it is even more complex. The important aspect that you may have to deal with is the stakeholders' interest, shareholders' interest, right? If each of the shareholders will go into a panic mode, right? For them, it is very important to not only protect their interest, but there are certain documentations in the process which will come along, will also talk adversely to their SHA, right? What will happen to their post-merger SHA and what will happen to their rights? Will those rights will flow from the parent to, right, post-merger scenario, when they will be holding shares in Indian company, yes or no, right? In case of a cross-merger transactions. cross-border merger transactions. But what is so important at the same time is tax implications that may arise in such transactions, right? That's very important. So if you work along with your finance tax team and also like global tax advisors in such cases, you will be able to like sail through this, anticipate these questions, most importantly like build your cap table, right? Swap ratios, show them, articulate it, also like show them what if when there is a future fundraise, right? How it gonna impact the cap table, specifically what will happen to the dilution, etc. Like if you could articulate, anticipate and present it well, I think mostly you'll be able to navigate these transactions. And interestingly, the other aspect is like in case of a acquisition, I would definitely want to see the board control, right? In like if there is a veto sitting with some investor's hands, yes or no. If that was the case, then it's a clear no, right? Red flag for me, then till the time it is resolved. Because you might invest. There can be situations that may lead to invest. I mean, in the startup scenario, if I were to speak, the acquisition could be for various reasons. The company will have a larger goal. They want to achieve those goals over a period of time. They may have funds. What they would rather do is instead of like putting a lot of efforts building by themselves, they would rather acquire a company to achieve their purpose. Or maybe investor-driven acquisitions where investor thinks like, okay, these two business collaborate well and then makes a lot of sense when if they were to like consolidate it and then it will better value to the investment. And in those cases also like you're forced to do such acquisitions. In those cases as well, you'll have to look at the compliances of the company. I'm sure like there are many examples in the startup scenarios in the recent past years that those acquisitions did not get through just because board composition issues, compliance related issues, and also the bad financial management. So what I would rather say in simple words is to like make sure that the company to be acquired, target company is thoroughly due diligenced, and then you know what is the risk, and then you take a call, right? And now if it takes for you to say no, we should not go ahead about this, I think you should have that audacity to let the management know this is not okay.
That I agree. And I mean, anyway, we as general counsels, our role is very, I think, it is very simple and clear as long as we acknowledge, which is that, raising red flags. But raising red flags and then not doing anything is also not that business really demands or needs from us these days. It is about understanding the objectives, as you rightly said, and once you have really understood the objective, we of course try to drive a value in terms of M&A by ensuring or finding ways within the legal framework and within the regulatory frameworks that's allowed to be able to give that value to the organization that it is looking for in an M&A. And yes, due diligence plays quite a part as far as an M&A, especially when you are acquiring someone is concerned. Yeah. So with this, Nikunj, what value do you see in implementing robust integration strategies and governance frameworks for companies to expedite value realizations and a smooth transaction for all stakeholders?
Yeah. Thanks. Hello, everyone. Nice to be here with this audience and with this panelist members. Very important question, Pathik, I would say. And to me, I think this effective integration starts not only after merger process ends. It actually starts when you decide to go and acquire some of the company, because it has to align with your original objective, strategic mindset, as also the synergies you are looking forward to. And a couple of points for the companies to consider is threefold. I would put it into three different buckets. One is people, second one is processes, and the third one is system. And if we take care of these broad topics, for example, if I talk about people, it starts with leadership alignment. So leadership of both the companies need to be first of all aligned about the vision of the combined company. If they are not aligned about the vision, number one, number two, about the synergy they want to achieve, as also the goals they want to achieve eventually. If we don't have that, I think this is where we have a problem to start with, even before merger process starts. Then comes cultural integration. And cultural integration, I think, has been a great pace, and we have discussed about cross-border merger as well. And it's not necessarily only for cross-border merger, it's equally applicable for domestic one as well. We have seen cultural differences, and I would call it cultural nuances, that can be as small as, working hours, what can be your policy for remuneration, what can be your policy for remuneration for petrol allowance or diesel allowance as well, right? So these are the topics which comes into picture when you get into the nitty-gritty of cultural nuances. I think the important thing to do at that point in time is to identify these differences and leadership to deliberate and decide how can we bridge those differences. I think this is what is the most important. Then comes very important, and Pathik, you alluded to it, is employee engagement and how can we retain our talent. So until and unless our employees are engaged and are aligned with the overall objective of merger, I think then we will not have our employees engaged very well, as also they may not see their future as well. And which is where comes a topic of retaining key talent. So couple of topics there. One, obviously, to identify key talent, but the second is to how can we develop other talents as well. And because we are talking about synergy, we will have scenario where we may need to take hard decisions as well as far as employees are concerned. But I think if our employees are engaged very well from the beginning, and they know the objective which we want to achieve, they will definitely be in line with organization would take decision. But at the same time, as I said, retaining talent is one, but at the same time, keeping or rather developing the new talent that becomes paramount at that point in time for leadership. Having considering this people topics, comes topic which is process and process alignment, which is easier said than done, because as I said, the processes for both the companies may be different, may not be dramatically, but I think this is where comes alignment of policies in line with the objective. Last but not the least is system integration. And system integration is broadly talking about integration of IT system and tools, and also taking stock of the redundancy, whatever we can do away with that, and also finally data migration. So I think these are the couple of topics for sure, but if we achieve these topics, then we are taking care of the broader objective of keeping our employees engaged, as also having a robust process, as also a robust IT system in place. So I think if we take care of this consideration, I think this would be really helpful in terms of effective integration. And as I said, it to start from day one, and it's not a post-merger activity. I would put it that way.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Nikunj. I mean, I agree. Integration is I think equally important. When we normally do an M&A, our focus generally mainly is to close the acquisition or close the acquisition, close the M&A, and we generally don't tend to look beyond and see how we're going to integrate. What are the cultural differences and cultural differences? In fact, I was just reading a data a few days back, and I realized 50% or more than 50% of the total M&A or potential M&As fall either before closure or soon after closure, mainly because of people differences and cultural differences. I mean, that's the amount of weightage that these aspects prevail. In fact, I think it's getting too serious a topic I'm not used to. So I'll just tell you a small. So see, most of us, of course, know M&As, how M&As happen. So we'll not really, spend too much time about how M&As happen. I would rather maybe say about, maybe more interesting would be to tell our own stories about what we have dealt with, or what we've gone through during M&As times. I'm sure we would have, most of us have been on all the sides of an M&A. We have been selling or seller, we have been buyers. I don't know how many of you have been the real targets of an M&A. And I have been one not very, not very long ago. And I'll just give you 2 minutes of background to what had happened. I joined a company, and it's a European multinational and a relatively a newer company in India. I joined thinking I am a European company, with everything in place. 6 months down the line, the European company files for insolvency. And thankfully, we were an Indian company, a separate company, in a way a separate entity, while we were 100% subsidiary of a European entity. But considering we were so new in the country, there was a lot of dependencies on the foreign company, or our parent company. Financing, technology, you name it, you have it, types. Now we didn't know what to do. Then the insolvency professionals or liquidators came in the picture. They tried selling the entire group. They could not sell it globally. Then we hear a news that most of the European business is being sold, and we are told, "Bhai, jo karna apna kar lo tum. Humse na ho payega." So, and then we didn't know again what to do. We thought we would really have to file for insolvency here because we didn't know. We had no real means to believe we would be able to achieve anything significant and at a pace that we needed to. Then someone from Middle East showed its interest to acquire the India operations of the business. And then came certain conditions that what do they need? They needed a lot of IP, they needed many other things from the liquidators. Unfortunately, by then liquidators had already sold most of it off to the company to whom global operations was sold off other than India. And then a new struggle started. We went and sort of requested the other group to sell India operations IP to us. As we were about to do something and we thought something would happen, COVID hit us. We were so new in India, we never thought we would have any reason to survive in India. There was no data rooms available. We had no idea now how to get the diligence done. And literally, we were sitting at our respective homes, requesting our team members, requesting our leadership, requesting everyone, "Yaar, jo bhi hai data, bhej do hame, and we'll see." And that's why we completed our diligence. It really took 10 months for completing that diligence by us. Thankfully, the group that wanted to acquire us did not pull back. But at that point, and from an integrity and ethics perspective, the question that also comes, especially when you're a target and it is a matter of survival for you. However, until you are literally sold, the day you are literally sold, where are your loyalties reside? That was the biggest question that came in. And I, being the risk officer, the compliance officer, the legal head, that there was a lot of onus on me on where will your loyalties reside with the group that you are still a part of in a way, because the company is under liquidation, it's not yet liquidated, or the loyalties should reside with someone who is acquiring you and who has also told you that you are going to be retained. But then I think that's where your professionalism, professionalism come in, and that's where is your real test of integrity versus ethics, or integrity and ethics. But I think what I really learned is that as long as you are doing things right, in the sense that you are trying to achieve or bring together, align the objective of both seller and the buyer, you are trying to derive the best possible value to both of them, and you are being pretty honest, straight, and you're just being transparent to both of them. I think that's what is going to drive you, or also tell you what kind of a person you are. And I am that way, sort of. I think I did the right thing, because Even after the deal was closed, and I had nothing really to do with the sellers, so to say. I was already an employee of the Target, which the Target was already acquired by the new group. But still, when the sellers needed to find a custodian to keep their shares until the final leg of consideration was paid, they said, we have confidence in Pathik, he be the custodian for us, in spite of I not being there in terms of any interests with them. So I think that's what really drives you as a professional, and that's what you should do primarily. With this, maybe Sanjit, how about your experiences, and more so maybe with the regulators? Lot happening on the M&A space, and lot happening with CCI and other regulators. What has been your experience in driving an M&A from a regulatory perspective in India or maybe globally?
So let me start by saying it's not a breezy walk in the park. You have to take each step very carefully.
That's why you are hired.
And in a cross-border transaction, it gets all the more tricky because you have to factor in the laws and the judicial precedents, the common law reality of each country. In my experience, we have to be prepared to collaborate and be consistent. We have to be prepared to provide clear information, but also be very clear about the purview of that particular regulator. So provide the information in a clear, concise manner which is relevant for that particular regulator. During the transaction, you might land up getting a lot of calls for information, which to us might not make sense, that why does the regulator need this kind of information? But you really don't have a choice, so you have to do the needful, provide whatever information is being sought, be transparent, but also be very cognizant of the fact that there's a lot of information in M&A deals that is confidential. So when you're dealing with regulators, you have to be very clear what can be disclosed in the public domain, or you have to invoke the confidentiality provisions and request the regulator to keep a lot of information that has to be kept confidential. Also, timelines are something that you cannot control. There might be a closing that you have announced to the market, but till the regulatory approvals come, you can't do anything. So you need to have your plan A. If that plan A fails, be ready with the plan B. If that fails, be ready with the plan C. Because you never know what's going to come from which corner of the world. Also, the reality of today's world is that all the regulators are talking to each other. Whether it is different regulators in India, or it is, for example, the antitrust authorities in different countries. So the stand and the information that is being provided across jurisdictions has to have the fundamentals very clear. It has to match with what are the submissions being made in different jurisdictions, because take it for granted that the regulators are going to talk to each other, and the filings that you're making in one jurisdiction could have an impact in other jurisdictions. So it's like take each day, we actually say that till all the regulatory approvals come, it's taking each day at a time, and be prepared to answer whatever questions come from any corner of the world.
Yeah, thanks, Sanjit. I think that also brings me to a very important aspect. As general counsels, we should learn to say no. No business leader would ever want to hear a no, or want to hear the problems. Of course, give them solutions as much as we can, but when we really see a red flag which we find a real red flag, we don't find a solution to it. Learn to say no. Say, we are the bad guys anyways, so you don't have to worry about that you will be labeled as a bad guy. So learn to say no. Learn to really put all the problems on the table. Of course, you will have to decide with business, you will have to find ways. But the starting point has to be there. And no one else would do it for you. So with this, Panduranga, how do you approach an M&A, especially keeping in mind the post-closing issues, and also maybe something interesting that you want to share in terms of your experience on a real M&A?
Yeah, I haven't done merger much, not much, but acquisitions I've done, right, by acquiring the shares, asset purchase, slump sale, right, many terms. We have to, like one of the instances where we had to get to asset purchase instead of acquiring the company just because of issues that I flagged. And ultimately we wanted their particular product that they had. The entire course behind acquiring that company was because of that product. Finally, when we felt like, okay, this company is not worthy of acquisition, then what we wanted was the product. So we got that entire shift change that we made to acquire that assets only of that company. Therefore, it is very important as to, lawyers have to be very smart, let the company know as to what was the issues. Now, why it is so important is the cost of compliance is too high at times. It can actually end up to ceasing the business itself. So the cost of compliances are too high, and expenses attached to it can be vary based on certain situations around it at that point in time. So hence, if you could flag them, you will be able to negotiate the consideration, and then you might save some monies, or maybe buy in certain from the target company that they would comply it subsequently, because condition precedent are generally sorted, but condition subsequent are. And if you have a counsel, which I did in one of the case, we retained the counsel, right? And when the company was acquired, who was working on the other side till the time we closed the documentation. And when the target was acquired, then he was part of the target. And now his obligation is to make sure the conditions subsequent are complied, right? So that will reduce some amount of a pressure on us, right, as a general counsels were to take a call in such case of acquisitions. And most importantly, few of the acquisitions where the cash has cash flow, there is no cash flow at all, right? What they would do to pay their salaries, etc., and maybe immediate invoices, settlement, etc., could be very challenging, right? Have we show empathy towards such companies, try fasten the transaction so that you will be able to complete it as soon as possible, so that there will be a solution provided, or else do get to an interim measure as to release some funds, right, while you do the transaction. And this call is something probably a general counsel will only be able to take, because general counsel know whether it is worthy of closing it today, tomorrow, or is we need to wait, right? If it is need to wait, then we should wait, right? We should not be in a hurry to say that, okay, we'll close it because management is pressurizing, right? At times CFO may be in a hurry, the CEO may be in a hurry. At times, your CEO and CFO may be traveling, you want to close the transactions beforehand. And I have told them, okay, you go and come back, we will do that later. But for now, we want that company to be surviving till the time you come back. Let's release some funds. Okay, so releasing funds subject to you have some control on the board, right? You have agreements executed for implementation, all of those have to be in place. Cultural differences, maybe at times, wrong hiring in the target company. The quality of hire could be very bad. The process could be bad, like he was mentioning. The chances that you take as a general counsel is most of the time you will be succeeding in terms of your documentation. But in terms of, whether this entire transaction succeeds is all dependent on how it has been implemented. Now, why would a general counsel take interest in those areas which is not a general counsel's area, only to save yourself from the future litigation or probable issues that may arise between the parties, right? If you put effort now, then probably you will have a better tomorrow, or else you will be like lazy today and you will have a problem, tomorrow. That's likely that happen, right? And unfortunately, like unlike matured companies, startups are not so matured. These founders of the startups are also in a hurry to make decisions very quickly, fail quickly, succeed quickly, right? And e-commerce, as I mentioned, has great possibilities of turning around the company very quickly. Like now I will be able to like do company EBITDA positive in 6 months. It is possible in e-commerce business. Okay, I'm looking at the time. So this is what I would like to say.
Sure. No, thanks. I agree with you. Cash issues as you spoke about, and I just, the example that I just gave you about I being the target, my parent insolvent. Well, what do you do in that stage? I did not even have money here to hire a counsel, right? So company had no choice but to listen to whatever I said. So with this, Nikunj, any last word on your experience before maybe a couple of minutes we open for Q&A before she tells us to get out?
Great. So I'll not spend much time, I think, because it's something which we already discussed. But I'll make two broad points. One, and this is from my experience, what I've seen in last 5-6 years is that normally we have that feeling that whenever we go for M&A, we always have all the time of the world to decide what we actually really want to do. And that may be true for 70-75% of the cases, but there are some cases where, for example, your industry is consolidating. So you really don't have a choice whether to acquire or not. So there is only two decisions to make. One out of two is whether to acquire or be acquired. So, and definitely, management would go with the first one. And obviously with all due diligences, whatever is needed, company would definitely march ahead. But having said that, that's one. The second piece I want to highlight is, in spite of taking all the care of the world, right from merger process to effective integration to everything, the success of M&A deal is dependent on external factors as well, right? So not necessarily your due diligence is whatever you do may be 100% true or will be proven to be true in future. So we may have surprises coming up in future as well. But having said that, I think this is where comes the agility of the organization to be ready for those challenges. And this is what we have seen that happening in our case as well. And I think we are doing well, according to me. And that's when comes this third and the integration piece, as I said. This is where it helps. Because if your employees are with you, they know what you have made decision and why, then I think it's a matter of time eventually for company to bounce back and come to a higher level. So I think this is where is I would say the journey, where if you have your people with you, I think it becomes easier, although it may be bumping ride in future.
Sure, thanks Nikunj. And as typical lawyers, we don't leave time and space for questions from the other side. I don't know if we still have.
We can have one question from the floor, sir.
The condition is should be an interesting question.
Hope it is. So see, in my career, I've seen where there have been M&A transactions more where there's an investor on, it could be a private equity or it could be a venture capital. They have a very specific, already a mindset that they're going out of this transaction for a specific duration. You all have been from corporates where you basically, if there's a transaction, you get married for life. So that's an absolute difference, because that's what happens is when we see corporates doing any of the M&A transactions, they think for a very long horizon. Incidentally now, and Pathik, I resemble where you mentioned that you were a target, but it's for a forum at large to understand. Incidentally now what we've seen is, in such transactions, the leadership skills and I would say, you already Nikunj mentioned about integrity and ethics, but leadership skills of the very senior people who are the ones who will continue to be helping in the business even after the acquisition, also are factors which now have been considered. Do you also, when you have been through this journey, considered not only the business which needs to be acquired, but also the key people who need to continue? And are there any specific, thoughts on it, and how do you do that?
Stab at it. Yes, I think that's a very interesting question, and that's what I meant to say. When it's my last comment.
You mean other than offering money to them, right?
Yeah.
So, as I said, number one, when you make a decision to acquire a company, actually you are acquiring that talent base and the position of that particular company, right? A position obviously is the one, let's say, one lever to consider. But when it comes to the employee and their engagement, as I said, that becomes paramount importance, because you know that what kind of people are there in the other company which you are going to acquire, and over a period of time, their integrity and let's say loyalty, as you said, loyalty to the company or the combined entity is not a very simple task. It's a difficult task to maintain over a period of time, and it becomes all the more important after merger or the integration process ends. Right, so during integration, everyone is excited. They will get roles, some may not get roles, and also I think everyone will get excited because there are concentrated efforts being done on change management. So therefore, people will definitely reach out to each and every employee in the corner. But it becomes difficult after that process ends, and which is where comes next level to say, what is your objective? What is your objective you want to achieve, or the vision and the mission? If you have a vision which excites people to come to office every day, then I think then it becomes, inherently motivation comes. In addition to Pathik, as you said, money, but yes, obviously that we need for living. But having said that, we are here to work as a professional somewhere, right? But what if you are working for a company which aligns with your vision and your wavelength? And this is what is something which I wanted.
Thoda philosophical ho gaya, but honestly, carrot works, right? Anyways, I think, thank you so much. Thank you everyone for being patient listeners and not asking many questions.